Maria, hello. You became a speaker. I was waiting for a few minutes now, and it's us again in the beginning. And then after this third part, we have already shown the results. The results are the questions that we have received. We're happy. Hello, Gregory. We're happy to receive any questions. We have received 3, and they will be answered during today's space. The general topic of our space series, which is, as said, today is part 3. We have discussed if we want to continue, and for now, it's all up to us, and we have both decided that there will also be a 4th one. Surely everything depends on the reflection, the response from the public, and the more questions or the more involvement from the public will receive, the higher the chance that spaces will continue. Today's topic, which Maria chose, is why collaboration is irrelevant in modern international law. I have had to shorten the title. So, Maria, you're most welcome to begin today's session with some enlightenment around the topic which Slovenia has not yet resolved, and we are here to help the process commence. Please, Maria, word is yours. Press the mic as usually. Yeah, perfect. It works.
Thank you. Thank you, Blaž, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming, and I think we'll probably get a few more as we go along. First of all, I wanted to say, didn't we celebrate Slovenian independence this past week, Blaž?
It was the statehood day.
That's right. That's right.
It was on Thursday.
Yes.
The party was great. Both President of the Republic, Natasha Pirc-Musar, and President of the government, Janez Janša, had their own speeches. And in Slovenia, the most important thing is how somebody said something, and people were not supporting the expose of the president, Natasha Pirc-Musar, and the whole issue is about the reflection or the response of the public, not so much the search for unity within the country. Hence, I mean, it all comes down to the situation we have. I already mentioned Red Deep State. Is it still on? Is it still active? And without this issue, we cannot discuss Slovenian politics. So, yeah, the state is working. It's young, officially. It's 35 years, while the Slovene nation has much longer history. So, in this sense, we are learning to behave in a Western democratic manner, and people like you will surely provide us help with that.
Yeah, I celebrated. I did go hear Janez Janša the day before, but I went to the Pivka military museum the day before to unveil a statue is what they were doing. But on Independence Day itself, I went to Kuchevsky Rog, and I went with two friends who had never been, and it was quiet and contemplative. We were the only people there. We didn't see any other cars. And if I have time at the end, I'll get back to that issue. Like I have in the other sessions, I want to briefly review democratic principles. It's the entire reason Blaž and I are doing this. We want Slovenia to succeed, but to accomplish that, facts about World War II and the post-World War II massacres must be publicized in a recognized institution which everyone considers to be the truth. These truths, this history, must be taught in schools. Curriculums need to be revised. And to succeed, Slovenia must become a true democracy. Previously, we outlined some of the components that are present in a democracy. They include free and fair elections, rule of law. I speak on rule of law considerably, protection of human rights, political pluralism, where a multi-party system allows for a wide range of ideas, open debate, peaceful political opposition, the separation of powers. Governance is structured with checks and balances, including an independent judiciary. Citizen participation is vital, and accountability and transparency is evident in the country. But by failing to fully acknowledge and account for the crimes committed by the communists, the result is a lack of faith in government accountability, damaged equal protection under the law, questionable independence in the judiciary, and the absence of an open debate and discussion on these and related topics. Today, I wanted to focus on collaboration. Why is collaboration irrelevant in modern international law? In summary, it is the crime that accompanied the collaboration that is important, if there was a crime. And we're going to talk about a number of examples. One of the main problems that I hear in Slovenia regularly is that nobody seems to understand the law on this. I hear blame for collaboration, traitors, but people don't know what the law says about these terms. So what is the legal definition of collaboration? In short, it is the intentional cooperation with an occupier that harms the state. But the intent is the most important part of this. Now, Blaž, you and I were talking earlier about some examples of this. You were mentioning blood revenge in Serbia, right?
Yeah, I was.
And attorney and investigator at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. It's one of the things that we all notice, those of us interviewing witnesses, is how often people blame the children for the crimes committed by the parents. Now, this is something that I found to be very different than, for example, in the United States, since I also interviewed hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of people when I was an FBI agent and a prosecutor in the United States. Generally, people do not blame the children for crimes that their ancestor or their father committed. And this is a holdover probably from many consecutive wars where justice has not been obtained. But with this kind of mentality, it makes it very difficult to go forward. So I would really recommend that Slovenians look at this. Speaking with the psychologist Petar Hribar, he felt that this was definitely part of the inherited trauma that Slovenians have, that they exhibit this type of reaction and feeling to have revenge rather than move forward and not blame people who weren't even born for many of the crimes. Now, specifically on the law, regarding collaboration. Usually this is brought up in regards to the Home Guard during World War II for having accepted weapons from the Germans. It's true that many members of the Home Guard took an oath that was required by the German occupation authorities, and that they started taking this oath in April 1944. There was a famous oath ceremony that was recorded and is on YouTube that one can see. And this fact has frequently been cited as evidence of collaboration. Defenders of the Home Guard, on the other hand, note that the Home Guard had previously sworn allegiance to the Kingdom of Yugoslavia in 1943 when they began, and again reaffirmed that allegiance in January of 1945. So these are competing facts, and whatever historical significance they have, my point is that they themselves do not establish criminal liability under international law. And that is because neither the Hague regulations, the Nuremberg Charter, nor subsequent international criminal jurisprudence recognizes collaboration with an occupying power as a crime, standing alone. Without accompanying criminal conduct, it's not an international crime. Criminal responsibility depends upon participation in recognized offenses. And we talked about some of those last week. They include murder, persecution, torture, unlawful executions, deportation, other violations of the laws and customs of war. For example, the Nuremberg Tribunal did not hold that membership in every military or auxiliary formation cooperating with Germany was inherently criminal. The Slovenian Home Guard was never put to the test. Rather, criminal liability rested upon proof of individual conduct in the case of organizations that were declared criminal. A prosecutor could prove that a defendant knowingly participated in the organization's criminal purposes. So applying the standards to the Slovene Home Guard during World War II, there is, as I also mentioned last week, credible historical evidence that certain members participated in unlawful killings, torture, and other crimes committed during the occupation. On our tour, for example, that I've spoken, where Americans came on a tour with me in fall in 2025, we visited Sveti Ur. There, it's established that Home Guards, although it wasn't their headquarters, they had a post there, and they did detain partisans there where they tortured them and they killed a number of them. They could properly, if they had survived the war and if they had gone on to trial, they could have incurred criminal responsibility for those actions, for those crimes, under internationally recognized principles of law. Their commanders could also have been prosecuted under the doctrine of command responsibility for knowingly ordering these crimes or permitting them. But the conclusion cannot be extended to every member of the organization, because, for example, if 10% of Home Guards committed these crimes at places like Sveti Ur, we cannot extend that guilt to the 90%, to the rest of them.
Can I just clarify? It's Sveti Urh, Saint Urh.
Thank you. And it's near Ljubljana, southeast.
East. Yeah.
East. Yeah. And it's a place really where prisoners were held from the beginning of the war. I mean, the Italians started it, the village guards had them, and then when the Home Guards got there in 43, 44, they used the post as well. Thank you. Modern and international criminal law rejects guilt by association. And we were just talking about that earlier. Slovenians tend to associate guilt and associate and attribute guilt to people by association. But that's not supported by law. In modern international law, guilt, it rejects guilt based upon political affiliation as well. It cannot attribute guilt solely to being a member of a military organization. So simply because one is a home guard, that doesn't make one a criminal. That doesn't associate them with crimes committed at any post. The governing principle has remained very consistent from the Hague regulations, which come from 1907, through Nuremberg after World War II, the Geneva Conventions, 1948-49, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, and the Rome Statute, which followed it. Criminal responsibility is individual. So, under the principles recognized by contemporary international criminal law, neither membership in the Slovene Home Guard nor acceptance of German weapons constitutes a crime. They could cooperate with German occupation authorities under the legal authorities given to them by being an auxiliary military force of the German occupier. Legally, they could act as a police force, which we talked about last week, because the German occupier was required to have a police force. They also are not legally culpable under international law for participating in military operations against the partisans. Both were military forces. Questionable whether they're legal or not, but legal isn't so relevant in modern international law. And just participating, fighting against the partisans, just standing alone, that does not establish criminal responsibility. A lawful prosecution would require proof that a particular individual personally committed, ordered, assisted, or otherwise incurred responsibility for recognized international crimes. As we discussed last week, in modern international law has rejected collective guilt.
Yeah. There is a break in voice.
Yeah.
There was a silence for a second.
Yes. So I'm moving to the next paragraph.
Uh-huh.
I also want to touch upon, because people discuss traitors, the concept of whether one is a traitor or not. The legal definition is a traitor is a person who intentionally violates a legally recognized duty of allegiance to their state or military organization by assisting enemy, participating in armed action against the authority to which they owe that allegiance. So normally, this is not a crime under international law. This is a crime that individual states use. Usually it's attributed to individuals, let's say that share intelligence, work for the enemy, and share intelligence with that enemy. They can be charged with treason in a number of countries for doing that. But if we apply it to, which it often is applied, to Yugoslavia and Slovenia during World War II, the first question would be, which state are we referring to? If you're a traitor against your country, what is that country? Well, it's the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. In 1941, it was the Kingdom of Yugoslavia until the end of the war in 1945. So initially, at the beginning of the war, the Yugoslav Royal Army supported the state. When Germany attacked, the Royal Army replied, or at least it tried to fight. It didn't last very long in Slovenia. Slovenia was cut off by the Croatia, the independent state of Croatia, cut off from Serbia and the Minister of War. After a few days, or maybe it was weeks, fighting, there was no Royal Army left. So there was no army supporting the state. Now, if we move forward chronologically, and also I want to say at the beginning of the war, there were no home guards and there were no partisan fighters, right? And significantly, the the partisan, the communist side, they were, well, at least Soviet Union was still allied with Nazi Germany. So there certainly were no partisans at the beginning of the war. When that changed,
War for Yugoslavia started on 6th of April, 41.
yes, it did. And so for 6 weeks or so,
No,
the
22nd of
partisan,
June.
right, the partisan was at least allied through the Soviet Union with Nazi Germany. They were not fighting Nazi Germany. But the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was still the state at that time. So if we're applying the question if someone is a traitor, it's after the war when it was a communist government. It was the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. And one could argue that the partisans were trying to overthrow the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. In fall 1943, the Italians leave the Axis and Slovenia. The Allies also begin supporting the partisans. But it's still the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. Neither the Home Guard nor the partisans legally supported the kingdom officially, although unofficially, because there was a large secret underground network among members of the Home Guard, they did support the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. They swore an oath, but that oath was mandated by the Slovenian Legion, not their own Home Guard. So officially, they did not support the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. After the war, Communist Yugoslavia is established. Initially, it becomes the Democratic Federal Yugoslavia, and it declares the Home Guards to be traitors. But international law did not. It does not support that argument, and it never has. This is something that came from the government, from the communist government at that time, but it's not supported internationally. I sometimes hear people state that the British or the Allies, because they supported the partisans, that they agreed with Yugoslavia that the Home Guards were traitors. Well, I've reviewed a lot of the documents in the British archives, and that's absolutely not the case. They did pursue and try to help Yugoslavia prosecute some of the Home Guards, but it wasn't for being in the Home Guard, it was for committing specific crimes again. So I would say they were trying to follow international law. Now, I want to move on to civilians. People would often say that civilians were collaborators during the war. And in fact, my grandfather, as an example, Narta Velikonja, was accused, although not by any law under Yugoslavia, but in the trial, of being a collaborator with the Germans. And that is based on the fact that he worked for the administration, the city administration of Ljubljana during World War II. Now, I know from the court record in 2015, the Slovenian Supreme Court ruled that he committed no crime, war crime in Yugoslavia at that time. So I think it's still an impression, though, that a number of people have in Slovenia, that working during a time of occupation is some sort of kind of collaboration and then for some kind of a crime. So I want to explore that idea a little bit. Now, certainly helping the occupier to torture and kill people would be a crime. I mean, that's no question about that. But working in a civil administration, what would make that a crime? In the first part of the war, my grandfather worked in for the University of Ljubljana. He fought with the Italian occupier, trying to get them to keep the Slovenian language because the Italians wanted to make it all Italian. Was that a crime? I mean, there were students going to school at the time. Are the students collaborating with an occupier by attending university? These are like rhetorical questions I'm throwing out. During the war, merchants were exempt. Occupiers needed their products. Civilians needed their products. They needed to eat. And they needed to keep the machine going. Does that make merchants collaborators or traitors? Well, under international law, no, it doesn't.
What about gostilnichari, the pub owners?
Well, who comes in to drink? Just the occupiers, or do the civilian population come in and drink as well? Probably everybody, right? No. I mean, what's a crime? Unless they spike someone's drink, right, and kill them, they're just serving beer or coffee, or that's not a crime. But people often think that those who are working under an occupation were collaborators, but I just want to ask, what does it exactly mean to collaborate with them? Because if life is to go on, if everyone isn't going to die within the first week of starvation, then these normal merchants, everything needs to continue. Products need to come, food needs to be delivered, farmers need to work. Where's the food going to come from? The entire continent is in war. My grandparents in Fiume, Rijeka, had a shipping and logging company. The occupiers left them alone. They worked for the Italians, but also on the side, they transported a lot of people out of Yugoslavia who didn't want to be there, including about 300 Jewish people. So there is a lot that goes on in a war. It's sometimes good to reflect on what exactly collaboration means. In Nova Gorica, Gorica at the time in 1944, under German occupation, the local authorities, with the Germans' permission, started a gymnasia, a high school, advanced high school, where Slovenian and Italian were taught. Without that effort, the Italians had just forced everyone to speak Italian. So it was the first time in over 20 years that local Slovenians could actually send their children to school and be educated in Slovenian. That qualifies as collaboration. I've noticed in a number of local books in Primorska that historians and people leave out this year. They say that the schools started in 1945, but they actually started in 1944. And I think they leave it out because that happened under German occupation. Yes, but the schools still started. Now, does that mean that all those professors were collaborating and all those students who attended and benefited from being educated in Slovenian were collaborating as well? Again, that's a rhetorical question.
May I just add, I've heard of an example that Slovene primary school was set up to work under Jugoslovanska vojska u domovini, or domobranci primorski, home guard from coastal region. And then the communist partisans attacked this primary school, and or there were possibly many cases like that. That if you would observe issue from the position of nation, the communists were also working in the opposite way against the nation.
Yes, that's historically accurate. In Primorska and Trieste, for example, the Primorski domobranci were not fighting partisans in that region. They were tasked with cultural activities. They helped restart the radio programs, the schools in Gorice, I'm not sure about Trieste, but they would have worked on it, and the theater in Slovenian again. The Italians didn't permit it, but the Germans did. And again, local historians, many of them leave those facts out. They say it just started in 1945 because that's what communists wrote. But the fact is that they started earlier. And then my question is that collaboration with Germans? Or if it is there a problem with that? It's certainly not a crime under international law. But there were a lot of these type of activities that benefited the local population and then were continued afterwards under different administrations. I want to bring
Maria,
up.
we are at the half. I already have some brainstorm issues written down. So keep that in mind. And we might even engage people like Darko, who is our listener. And we have also 3 questions. So please, this is halftime.
Do you want me to start with the questions?
I just have one brainstorm issue to explain. First of all, thank you for the bringing in the legal debate, the legal level, especially on international law, to put things in perspective. Because in Slovenia, after the war and all until now, the red side, let's communist, red, whatever you want to call them, this side based all their focus on emotions rather than law. And these emotions were professional PR and propaganda, brainwashing. So the so-called traitors were compared to Dante's lowest circle in hell, and they were actually treated as despicable or even untouchables, like in India. The topic was not present except as in curse words. So you were traitor. Somebody was traitor, and you emphasized the difference between combatants and traitors. And the second part of my interlude is about the fact that people don't realize, not in Slovenia and so much less in abroad, that we had a complete revolution going on, and what communist side morally demanded from people and from everybody, that they follow exactly only their own agenda, their own rule book. So today, 2026, people are still rehearsing the old explanations of people like in 70s. What they have been taught in schools in 70s and 80s is still holding in their heads. So the same is with history, law and history. The history allows us to look back each time present, and people cling. I don't know from where this comes, but people actually actively cling to old explanations that were made like in 80s, 70s, and they cannot proceed on. Therefore, we are still dealing with the topics of Second World War instead of going back in Slovene history, which is few thousand years richer than actually today is taught. So thank you again. Modern international law should enable us to look at all these issues again. For example, Kočevje process, which was done during one of the offensives of the occupier. And the question is, was this court set up in Kočevje by partisans, by communists, Was it fair? Was it legal enough to be considered or taken up as a regular process, valid? So please, do you have comments on this? Afterwards, if you respond, we will go to those three questions, and then we will ask people like Darko to join the debate. Thank you.
Yeah, just briefly. Yes, I agree with you. This is what I have observed since I speak out a lot. People do respond to me, and I hear. I have the sense that they have not moved on from what they were told in school. In fact, that's what I hear. They taught us in school that. But they've never heard of international law, and they don't know the law. And often it seems that the historians don't know it either. They're not moving on, and it's critical that people go back and re-examine this and redefine it, rethink it, so that Slovenia can move on as a country. I think that's an excellent observation about it being emotional, and they're putting the emotions before logical thinking about the law, and that's why I want to emphasize the law and over again. So why don't we go to the questions then? Do you want to read the first one?
Yeah, surely. The first one came from John from USA. I had two relatives who were in the Domobranci, so home guard. My grandfather who survived and an uncle who was killed, probably in Kočevski Rog. All my life growing up in my Slovenian community, that's in USA, other Slovenians told them that they were collaborators or traitors. Why is that? Were they wrong? Where did these ideas come from?
Well, I happen to know that this John is from Cleveland, so I'm familiar enough with the community there to be able to respond in some detail. They were, yes, they were wrong about blaming everyone who was in the Home Guard for being a criminal or being a traitor or being a collaborator, because fighting in the Home Guard, as we've just discussed, does not make them traitors without having committed an individual crime. Collaboration is not relevant in international law. And in fact, because this is something I study and write on, most of the Home Guards who joined the Home Guard to fight for the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, not against it. They supported their state. That does not make them traitors. That makes them loyal subjects. Because and they had a right to fight, as we discussed last week. They had a right to fight the partisans because they did not want a communist form of government. Just as the partisans, I will say, as an organized army, had the right to fight the Home Guard because they wanted a communist form of government. Accepting weapons from the Germans for the purpose of fighting the partisans is a form of collaboration, but it is legal under international law, and it's not relevant anyway. Now, where did these ideas come from? Now, this I know specifically where. This came from UDBA. UDBA operating in the United States. They were very successful at infiltrating the Slovenian or Yugoslav organizations at the time, already beginning in the 1950s. And they were very successful at persuading, they're very influential among Slovenians who had come as economic migrants at the turn of the century. They had no experience with communism, no concept of what it meant, and they were easily fooled.
Maria, please, this is you are describing a soft spy power and the quality of the stories. And by this example, what you're telling now that UDBA was deeply into these communities, this shows their specialities. They were good at this way of manipulation and, let's say, politics as well.
Oh, they were extremely good at it. First of all, UDBA, as we know, most or recruit. Maybe we have to do a whole talk on UDBA, Blaž. They were, it's just in summary, recruited for their ability to kill and assassinate others, probably psychopaths. And in later years, they were trained by the Soviet Union, KGB and their intelligence, and they were extremely good at infiltrating all the Slovenian, all the Yugoslav organizations in the major cities, Cleveland, New York, Toronto, certainly. As an example, I will give my uncle, Vladimir Rus, who many people from Cleveland will know. When he arrived in Cleveland in 1951, he had already been labeled by UDBA as an UDBA. And I know for a fact he wasn't, because his mother, my grandmother, was imprisoned and tortured by UDBA for 4 years in Reichenberg Castle. And anyway, I have extensively interviewed my uncle about all this. And he was excluded from the Slovenian choir, although he had been a professional musician in Rijeka. And a number of the social activities were cut off to him. And this was because members believed when UDBA, they didn't know they were UDBA, would tell them that he was UDBA. They were planting, this is called...
But I'm sorry, look. The home guard side has had an experience of 4 years of deceitfulness and conspiratorial ways of communists, and to not expect some infiltrators from communist side is hugely naive.
Yes, it was. I wanted to say it was disinformation, and that's not misinformation. That's intentionally spreading false information. We can get into that more deeply. Well, that's a whole discussion in and of itself, but those are the answers to that question. Why don't we move on to the second question?
Yes, we shall. Mojca from Slovenia asked, I read that home guards helped Germans load Jewish people onto trains somewhere in Ljubljana. Isn't that collaboration?
Yes, I think it is. But the act in itself is, if proved, is probably a crime, but not the collaboration part of it. The crime of loading people if they knew that they would be sent to a concentration camp, then yes, that would be a crime. Home guards were authorized under international law to act as a police force, since the German occupier was required to protect civilians, but that's not acting as a police force. By knowingly placing civilians, Jewish people, on a train to Auschwitz, for example, to their deaths, that could be prosecuted as aiding and abetting the Germans in a crime against humanity, but not because it is collaboration. And that's just the distinction that I want to say. There is an underlying crime there.
Do you have any idea on what the home guards that were supposedly packing people on trains, Jews, what was the knowledge they had of
No, I don't even know. I've just heard some people say they were, but I haven't read about, and honestly, there isn't. I just haven't read of a case where they were doing that. I was alleged in Trieste by someone, but that was false because the home guard weren't even in operation at the time that it was alleged. But as far as Ljubljana, I haven't particularly studied that, so I don't know. Maybe one of our listeners will know.
Okay. We go to the third question. Did any Western power commence legal proceedings against low-level collaborators, however you want to define them, that term, at the end of Second World War? What was the outcome? Did any Western nation do anything comparable to what happened to the Domobranci?
First of all, I want to say that I think this is Greg. This is Greg Marshall. Are you on the line, Greg? I think he's here listening.
He could be switching mic on and join us as a speaker. Anyone can do it. We are coming to that part, so please.
Yeah, so this is Greg Marshall. He's the grandson of Valentin Marshall, and he was on the tour with us last fall. So Greg, if you're there, you can cut in anytime and interrupt me and start talking.
Has been invited to speak, yes.
Good. While he's working with the mic, this is not something I particularly study as far as Western powers. They would have commenced legal proceedings against lower level people, not because they collaborated, but because they committed crimes. And again, I want to draw that distinction. I am aware of the Allies, the British in particular, assisting actually the communist government of Yugoslavia in prosecuting some of the home guards. But again, they were looking for specific crimes, not because of collaboration.
This is Greg Marshall speaking. Sorry, I managed to get on now. I did ask the question, and to me, just partly as a historian, partly as someone with some connection with this, I look at the Nuremberg trials, for example, and even then you had major Nazis such as Rudolf Hess or Albert Speer not receive the death penalty. And in fact, Speer was later freed after 20 years. These are the major top Nazis. If we go across Europe, we had so-called collaborators all over in the Netherlands and France in particular, but we don't have those kinds of killings. Yes, there were some popular ostracization, in some cases worse, but there's nothing I know of that was this widespread labeling that anyone who did something must somehow then be summarily executed. And so my question is, can you give me an example, can anyone, of another country that had the same level of mass killings of groups like the Domopranzi in Western Europe?
No.
I might interrupt with just one case. Hello, may I call you Grega because it's Slovenian.
You most certainly may. Yes.
Yeah. So Grega, thank you very much, and all the respect to your legacy. In Western Europe, the largest killings were of starvation of the Wehrmacht military by the Rhine, mostly. So we're talking about 1 million or something. And then, yes, after the Second World War, Yugoslavia is championing the mass killings, I believe.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there wasn't mass killing. I mean, certainly people have accused our General Eisenhower, before he was president, of starving Germans in France. Now, if that was intentional or not, if it was intentional, they clearly tried not to make it a crime. Let's put it that way. So the answer would be no, because first of all, the labeling is one question, and then the murders are a second question, right? The Kochevsky Road murders, all the 100,000 that were killed, approximately 100,000 people, not just Slovenians, mostly non-Slovenian, that were repatriated by the British from Austria to Slovenia, and then were killed and put into concealed mass graves. That is a clear crime against humanity. That's something I'm going to talk about at a different, more extensively in another session. But Western powers definitely did not want to commit crimes at that level, and they strive very, very hard not to do it. So, no, they did not commit crimes at that level, although people did die in large numbers, and I question whether some of them were done intentionally, although they could not be labeled as a crime. Secondly, the labeling, that comes from years of communism and communist propaganda. And that propaganda started really before World War I started. I mean, it was already planned. All the stationery, for example, everything that was written by the communists or during the war by partisans and those involved in the communist parties.
Might we just add that the Communist Party in old Yugoslavia before the Second World War has been forbidden also because of the terrorism they were performing. So the patterns are quite repeatable with today's standards even.
Yeah.
So it was a forbidden political party.
Yeah. But the point I wanted to make is even during the war, they were using a stamp. You know how they say smrt fascism. That's how they end.
Smrt fascismo.
Yeah,
Death
they
to the
end
fascism. Yes.
death to fascism on every letter. Well, this already started during the war. I mean, it just to put a label on. If you are against us, then you are a fascist.
May I just add, it was death to fascism, freedom to the nation. But there is a intriguing lingual problem, legal problem as well. May I just use 1 minute? In Slovene, when you say narod, it means blood and soil connected, because you are born into, naroditi se, to be born into. And then you have expression ljudstvo. Ljudstvo is people, and people are electorate. While in Serbia, if you say narod, it already means people. So it's a big distinction, because it's also problematic for Slovene partisans, because they were always fighting for narod in a sense of Slovene nation, but they did not deliver after the Second World War, because Slovenia was not independent, but was a part of Serbization in Yugoslavia.
Well, then, this is Greg Mitchell again, and let me flip this around for a moment, because we're taking this label, the Domobranci, as if they were a uniform group of apparently about 100,000 people or so. Can we spend a minute just talking about why people would have joined the Domobranci and what they would have done on a day-to-day basis? Because I think that would illuminate part of the problem.
I agree with you. Go ahead. Oh, you want to start, or do you want me to start?
Let me start, but I won't guarantee that I'm going to get all of the facts correct. But my understanding is that when the Nazis came in to Slovenia, they basically did what they always did, which is disarm the police. And as a result, the general populace was left undefended. They provided no protection for the general populace, which in turn had to protect itself against both ordinary criminals and the actions of the partisans. And so this group was created defensively, my understanding, so that people could maintain some level of peace and stability when the official government no longer existed and the Nazis were not providing them any protection against crimes against them. That's part one. And then part two is, it sounds to me as if these folks were largely committing, for the most part, police type functions. They were there to keep the peace in their towns, as there was no one else there doing that. And to label them all as a brush of these somewhat evil collaborators because someone once saw someone committing a crime, and we know that some of them did. But you're taking that and extrapolating across an entire population and then killing them without trial as a result. That's a bit of a leap.
May I just thank you very much. Excellent. Just your viewpoint was from the way to deliver as much peace to in the set situation, which is your country is occupied. Let's maintain peace, and here is the clinch of the issue. The communist side claims that there during the war, such as that was, there was no moral right to just try to keep the peace. You had to jump on the train of revolution, and this was the moral outrage after this all those years, 80 years of propaganda, that they claim that the moral high ground is definitely theirs. They cannot recognize the situation either from the international law perspective or your common life perspective. Perfect. Thank you.
I know
Yeah.
we're running out of time, but let me add something just because I suspect my grandfather would badly want to say this. You know, we 80 years have gone by, and this was a man that believed, I think, fundamentally in the humanity and goodness of everyone. If a partisan had come to him as a physician, he would have treated him without question. And I think he would say, it's 80 years. Let's acknowledge what happened. Let's have a round of forgiveness. Let's give the dead a decent burial and a prayer, and let's move on and live together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what my grandfather would have said too. Yeah, I agree with all those comments, Blaž. Greg, there's an excellent description of how how the village guard started, and then how the home guard started in 1943. There's a lot that isn't known about the day-to-day business of the home guard. Frankly, what do you think about this, Blaž? I think a lot of it is, first of all, most of them were killed, but many of those who survived went to the United States, and they aren't in Slovenia to tell. They weren't in Slovenia to tell their story, and they couldn't anyway during communism.
Well, my first idea always is get it on YouTube. Like, I mean, National Slovene Television made a series of interviews of different kind of victims of communism. So hopefully there are stories to be told, and they might be collected on YouTube, if not any other platform.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm aware that they've interviewed a number of certainly the Study Center for Reconciliation. They interviewed my father, who was in the Primorska Domobrance. They interviewed him for about 4 hours. Of course, I'm writing a book on him. That'll be far longer. But I think Greg's initial point is a very good one. It hasn't really been told what was the day-to-day life of a home guard. Now, I assume that is different in different regions. I know it quite well for the Primorske Domobrance, because my father and my uncle, who I already mentioned before, were both in it. But for Ljubljana, it might have been quite different, and I think that's a good story to tell that I certainly don't read a lot about from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, we have 2 more minutes. Darko, if you want to join, anyone else? Thank you, Greg. I mean, Maria, you know, the freedom is nothing left to lose, but we can prolong this for let's say half an hour and continue. I mean, the chat is promising, at least. Darko, please. I mean, Maria, can we keep up with this?
Yes, if Darko has something to say, go ahead.
Please, thank you. I have to, what? This is me now. Request, add a speaker. Darko, you are a speaker. Push the red button, make it violet. Otherwise, Maria, we can switch off the mic when we are not talking. The same with Grega. Darko, is it working? Sometimes it pushes people down and then they have to restart. We'll see. No. So, Grega, how much is there energy for this kind of activities in USA? how many people would like to communicate, we have this opportunity. One of them as a beginning. And how do you perceive Slovenia at the moment, if you may?
So there was a Grega, and then there's Greg Marshall. I wasn't sure which one you were speaking to.
Wow. Well, Gregory Marshall.
So this is interesting. I live in a part of the United States now, which is Northeast Ohio. It's pretty much in the middle of the country, if you're not familiar with it, where a large number of Slovenians settled. And they settled in two waves. One was, I think Maria noted this, was at the beginning of the 1900s as people were looking for employment, and those folks ended up working in manufacturing, primarily in Cleveland. So you would see a large part of industrial workers had come from Slovenia or descended nowadays from those who had. Then there was a second wave that came at the end of World War II, and many of them had fled the country as a result of the activities in May of 1945 forward. And a lot of those were of a professional class. So you saw a lot of teachers, doctors, professors, that type of thing there. In the United States, we're a small minority group. I think Maria can attest to that. It's still a very active group together. There are Slovenian groups that get together, but the United States has a habit of assimilating people. If you had asked my father, for example, who fled Slovenia when he was 11, at that point, still Yugoslavia, but one of his proudest days was when he got his American USA passport, and he would say he was an American. That was a really huge piece here. And I think you need to understand that with the United States, it has that effect on really every group that enters. Having said that,
well, you Americans have to be patient with us nationalists, who keep being the identity of Slovenia, although 2 million. Thank you.
Well, you still get it definitely here, though. I just want to say that's a force that's here, and it really happens with almost every group that comes here. But having said that, the Slovenian group is held together quite well. We have a Slovenian language newspaper, maybe, I don't know, 30 miles from me, which in the United States is a very short distance. There's a retreat called Pristava, which is basically a cultural center for Slovenians. People will still.
It's more like Pristava,
I'm sorry, my apologies. You see a lot of ties among the Slovenian community to Slovenian churches, primarily St. Vitus in Cleveland, where I was baptized, I might add. And so you have these communications that are still there. People will walk up, you'll see a naming, oh, you're Slovenian. It is a, it's like a, I won't say a secret club, but there is a lot of people tied up in the identity. Now, the issue then, as you just pointed out, Slovenia is a smaller country of 2 million people. The United States, I think, has something over 300 million right now. And we've got a large number of ethnic groups that are far larger than Slovenia. And so if you were to ask the average American, they would probably at best understand this as something as part of all the death and destruction that took place in the First World War. And where in Slovenia as well as the United States, a lot of the people that lived through that are no longer with us. My father-in-law was in the United States Navy in World War II. He died 20 years ago. It's true, really, anyone who was a veteran during World War II would have been, probably 98 years old or older now. And then you look at the history that happened there, from the American perspective, certainly it was important. We were involved in a two-front war. Our troops were being sent from the United States into Europe and also into all over Asia and the Pacific theater. So you have an awful lot going on. But our country itself was never, the United States proper was never really invaded. Certainly the Pearl Harbor bombing started a lot of this in Hawaii, which was then a territory, now a state. But by and large, people are focused, the country as a whole, on just how ugly the ending of it was. We did win. It was, what some people would call a, quote, good war, in the sense that we went in for a good reason. Now you drill into what happened afterwards, and it wasn't just Slovenia. The communist takeover and mass killings were taking place all along what we would call the Iron Curtain. So you have Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania to the north. We know almost nothing of them because they were just sucked into the Soviet Union, even though they all have their own fascinating histories, and they're all roughly the size of Slovenia. Poland, unfortunately, was overshadowed by the horrific murders committed by the Nazis there.
Excuse me, I want to say to Darko Bulat, who is desperately trying to come in, and I would gladly approve him even more, but I advise him to go off X, and then
I think we should be able to hear me.
Darko, excellent. I'm getting constant information that you are co-hosting, and I can't see you. So please, Gregory, if you have a short finish, then Darko will join us.
So the short answer is, from the United States perspective, this is one of many incidents that were taking place at the same time. It's not first and foremost to us simply because we are at a distance, but the Slovenian community still cares about this, and they still, what they want is very simple: acknowledge what happened, let's bury the dead, say a prayer for them, and let's move on happily.
Thank you very much, Gregory. The problem in Slovenian case is not the absolute numbers, but the numbers of percentage of people that the percentage devastated the nation itself. So please, Darko, I can't even see your icon. So please work with us and join into speech.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello. Initially, I would like to welcome or to say hello to everybody, but then to say that I came to Slovenia in the 90s. So I was born a little bit south in Zagreb. And I would like to offer a little bit of perspective from outside of Slovenia, but not too far from Slovenia. So from the Croatian perspective, in a way that there is this misconception that Yugoslavia during World War II is one and the same territory, which is not the case. Slovenia, the part of what is today Slovenia, was very separate from the rest of former Yugoslavia. So in Croatia, you had this independent state of Croatia. In Serbia, you had Nedic Serbia. Macedonia and Montenegro also had their own stories. And I put to everybody that the worst communist terror happened precisely in Slovenia. And the reason that people in Slovenia don't understand this and compare things in Slovenia to, for example, battles like Neretva and Sutjeska and Kozara, and the liberation of the Belgrade and whatnot. These stories only serve communists here in Slovenia because there was no serious resistance in Slovenia. And this is something that troubles communists here in Slovenia very much. That's why they like to align Slovenian story to these sudden stories, which is irrelevant. But likewise, people in Croatia and Serbia and Bosnia do not fully understand how vastly different situation in Slovenia was. Slovenia did not have any so-called problems regarding different nations. There were no problems like in Croatia, where you had the Serbs, Croats and Muslims. and the problems that arise from that. In Slovenia, you had only two factions, and that is something that I learned while I was in Croatia still. There were only two factions, and these two factions exist these days. So-called liberalci, liberals, and so-called clericalci, clericals. Those two factions are provisional names. They do not exist as compact factions, but it so happened that clericals are perceived to be aligned with the backward, conservative, whatnot, while the liberals were perceived to be something very, very forward-thinking, very liberal in the broadest sense, and so on and so forth. So this kind of division in Slovenia then transpired to this what happened at the initial stage after June 22nd. After June 22nd, when the communists a little bit realigned from Hitler and with Stalin, and of course against their own people. Nowhere in former Yugoslavia, nowhere on the territory of the former Yugoslavia during World War II, were used the term White Guard, Bela Garda, White Guard. Only in Slovenia. And only in Slovenia you had this so-called Osvobodilna Fronta, Liberating Front. Nowhere else. Only in Slovenia. And only in Slovenia you had its executive branch, or to put it like this, terrorist branch, so-called VOS, Varnostno-obveščevalna služba, which did the majority of the killings. So the point was that right after the June 22nd, communists understood and had the opinion that now Hitler attacked Soviet Union will retaliate, and we will soon, very soon, be masters of the situation. So they started these killings of perceived enemies of the communists, and they branded them White Guard. Why? Because White Guard was the term basically imported from the Russian Soviet revolution, communist revolution in 1917. There they had the White Guard. There were no white uniforms and of course not uniforms, because people shy of communism or even trying to fight against communism, they did not have any uniforms. They were not organized. They basically tried to survive. But the communists needed to brand to mark the enemy so that they know how to do it. The problem with the term White Guard is that we are now in year 2026, and this term is alive today, and you can find it on the forums, you can find it on Facebook, on many places where communists use the term White Guard. And if they do not say that they are
or the
communists,
Bilčke.
using the term White Guard is prime example of communist vocabulary. There's no other way to put it, and they used it. Then there's this. We had in Yugoslavia, we had so-called characteristics, which is a little bit of dossier of a person. Let's suppose Darko Bulat or Blaž Babič tried to get the job. So there was this dossier, short dossier, which would say a background for the family and a little bit of that person. It's not the criminal dossier. It's a personal dossier. It's a political dossier. And these dossiers had markings. For example, if someone was perceived to be if his relatives or close or were somehow aligned with the Domobranci, they would have a small letter D, small capital letter D, somewhere marked on the sides of these dossiers. So there were never explicit written, but this letter D was enough to disqualify someone from the position. D would stand for Domobranci. So it was perceived that the person applying for the job was from Domobranci family. If there was not Domobranci but was anti-communists, then he would get the marking BEGA,
Darko.
BE-GA, and so on and so forth.
Thank you very much. I would like you to put a question to our Maria and Gregory, if you have one. I just want to complete your observation. You said that the Slovene nation was split in clericals and liberals parts. I just would like to add that Slovene nation as a whole has been attacked by 5 forces at the same time. Italian forces, German forces, Hungarian forces, Croatian forces, and communist forces.
Well, yes, that is so, but these are how to say dynamics of the war. So this is not something unheard of, because borders are something that is changing during the wars.
Did anyone any time say that home guards attacked Slovenia? I think not. Even the communists could not invent such a claim.
Not only that, but the level of collaboration of the home guard is such that you could not find, for example, any military unit of the home guard somewhere on the Eastern Front like what Croats had. Croats had their legions fighting at Stalingrad or something like that. But that's beyond the point, because the main issue with communists with fighting their narrative is to realize that their strongest argument, even to this day, is that they are on the so-called right side of history, which means that they somehow won the war. They were with Stalin, who basically won the war, and that the fact that they won the Second World War gave them the license to do whatever they please. Now, if we agree to that, then we can just say, okay, you have it, that's it. But then again, they lost in 1990 when Slovenia gained independence. The Red Star lost at that time. But it so happened that our first president then proudly presents the Red Star, and the Red Star is still present, and there are so many communist monuments.
That was on Thursday. Last Thursday, our Kuchan
basically,
had pinpoint. Yeah.
So what people don't realize is that Slovenia is basically so deep in the communist doo-doo that it's impossible to comprehend. It's really we kind of did not do much of democratization of Slovenia ever since 1990. We did some superficial things. We had so-called transition. Transition is basically, from today's perspective, is just a period of a little bit of uncertainty for communists between 1990 or 91 to 1994. 94 is the critical and the key year of recommunization of Slovenia. That is the year that the most of communists came back to power, That is the year when the judiciary gained its unlimited terms. That is the year that Depalavas happened, and so on and so forth. There are many things that happened in year 94. That's why I call this year, that 94, as the year of the recommunization, and everything else is just the flow of time did not help democratization. We now have
Darko, please.
we now have Ustavno sodišče. Oh, sorry.
Constitutional Court, but let's put a comma here. Sorry. You have great observations. Thank you very much for that. I just want to ask Maria Gregory if they what's the impression of this expose, which was I will not comment yet. So please, this or any other wish, please.
Okay, Blaž. Thank you, Darko. I mean, those are excellent observations. I'll just comment on a few of them. The comment about communists feeling that they have license to do what they please. I definitely hear that from people in Slovenia. It's the license, however, it didn't come from the Allies. I mean, 2 months ago, I spent a week in the archives in London, the British archives, and I read thousands of documents. And the Allies clearly didn't feel that way. I mean, it was a compromise they were forced into. They wanted to win the war, and they needed the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union insisted that Yugoslavia come along with them. They objected in many ways to it, and they certainly did not like what they saw with the behavior with the Yugoslavia and the communists. Having said that, though, I also observed certainly during the war, let's say OSS files, our former CIA files, they were inside, embedded with partisans during the war, and they were clearly influenced by them. I start seeing OSS officers write about the White Guard. Well, who did they get that from, right? They got it from the partisans. They certainly didn't get it from the home guards, because the home guards didn't call themselves that. That came from Russia, as Darko was explaining. And I think that's an astute point. With the terrorism being in Slovenia, what I've observed from people from the other Yugoslav parts of Yugoslavia outside of Slovenia, is that they do not really understand the terror and the crimes even that were committed. Kuchevsky Rog, Huda Yama, and the other 800 concealed mass graves. Many people are not even aware of them, which is astounding to me, but it didn't happen on their territory. On the other hand, it happened in Slovenia, and Slovenia has to face it head on. All right, go ahead, someone else.
Thank you. Gregory, any comment or answers?
Well, sadly, history is written by the victors, and the partisans were the victors in Slovenia, Yugoslavia in 1945, with substantial support of the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, we in America have bumped into this fairly often. Just one recent example being Afghanistan. During the Cold War, the United States backed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan for the simple reason that they were the best fighters. Fast forward, suddenly they've got control of the country, and we no longer like them. And so I think what we're seeing is almost the same thing unfolding in Slovenia with our OSS, where they went along with what a compromise of supporting their ally, supporting who they thought might be the best fighters, so they could win that war at that time, without a whole lot of thought about what was going to happen in the decades that followed.
Yep. Darko, be quick until half
I would like to add
past
a little
10,
bit.
please.
Yeah, I would like to add a little bit of info on this. OSS. I have also read some OSS files. These are very interesting because they show clearly that that parts of the so-called liberated territories under communist rule were so strictly and very unfree compared to so-called really liberated territories under so-called Jugoslovanska vojska otadžbini or Yugoslav army in the homeland, which is
Domovini.
which is a regular name for the colloquially known Chetniks. And we all know that, for example, in Slovenia, during in 1943 in year 1943 at Grčarice, communists collaborated with the former Italian soldiers, and with help of their guns conquered some outposts of the Yugoslav army in Domovina, so the Chetniks, and then they killed the survivors. It's in so-called Kočevski procesi. The funny thing is that contemporary court in Slovenia a couple of years ago said that it's okay. So it was basically fair trial. So we are in communist country still, and this is very, very dirty, because up until 1944, Josip Broz was not a regular commander in chief. So the point is that people seldom don't know that up until Sporazum, the agreement between Josip Broz and Šubašić, so-called Šubašić-Broz Sporazum, there was no much of momentum for communists. They were very good at propaganda, but not on the field. So only after this Sporazum, when King himself used the službeni list, which was